There's a moment in every person's life when the weight of being needed suddenly becomes unbearable. When you realize that your love, your sacrifice, and your endless giving has never been about connection, it's been about convenience. For me, that moment came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, when my mother decided to discard me like I was something she'd used up and no longer needed. What I didn't know then was that her rejection would become my liberation. Hello? Thank you for being here? For listening. Before I tell you what really happened, I want you to know that what you're about to hear is filled with truth, betrayal, love, and redemption. Behind every closed door, in every family, there are stories nobody talks about. Stories about sacrifice that goes unappreciated. Stories about people who give until they have nothing left. I'm telling you mine, because maybe it will help you see your own situation more clearly. And if you feel moved by what you hear, please consider subscribing to this channel. Sharing these stories helps others realize they're not alone. Now, let me tell you what really happened. The text arrived while I was making dinner. I was standing in my kitchen, the kitchen of the apartment I'd worked hard to afford on my own, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry I'd planned to eat alone. My phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't recognize the conversation thread at first. It was a group message. My mother, my sister, and me. The message was from my mother, Margaret. I can still see the words exactly as they appeared on my screen. We've agreed you're no longer part of the family. Don't come to any gatherings, we don't want to see you anymore. I stopped mid-chop. The knife hung in the air above the cutting board, suspended in a moment that felt frozen in time. I read it again. Then again, waiting for it to make sense, waiting for context, waiting for something, anything, that would explain why my mother had just written those words to me, as if I were a stranger she'd decided to block from her life. That's when I saw it. Diane had already liked the message, my sister. She'd seen this rejection of me, our shared daughter and sister, and she'd pressed the thumbs up emoji like she was approving a dinner reservation, not a family dissolution. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, holding a knife, holding my breath, holding on to the last threads of hope that this was some kind of mistake. It wasn't a mistake. My hands were shaking. Not from anger yet, from something deeper, from the realization that the people I had given everything to had just given me nothing. I set the knife down carefully, very carefully, because if I didn't concentrate on that small action, I was afraid I might fall apart, and I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. Not until I understood. I called my mother 3 times. She didn't answer. I texted her, "What does this mean?" Silence. I called my sister. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice before she even spoke. "Diane. What is this? What's happening?" "Mom said she doesn't want to talk to you anymore," Diane said flatly. "Neither do I." "Why? Did I do something? Did I say something?" There was a pause. In that pause, I waited for a real answer. Instead, Diane said, "You know what you did, or didn't do. Mom's tired of it. We're all tired of it." And then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that, still holding my phone, still waiting for someone to call back and tell me this was a prank. A misunderstanding. A mistake. Nobody called. I looked at the vegetables I'd been chopping. The water in the pot had stopped boiling. Everything felt cold suddenly. The apartment, my hands, my chest. Everything. That night, I didn't eat. I sat on my couch in the dark and tried to make sense of what had happened. My mother and I had always been close, or at least I had always believed we were. I was her only daughter who had stayed nearby. I was the one who drove her to her doctor's appointments. I was the one who paid her mortgage when she fell behind. I was the one who showed up, or so I thought. My sister lived 3 states away and rarely called. My brother had moved to California and didn't visit. But me? I was here. I was present. I was everything. And apparently, that meant nothing. The questions came fast and furious. What had changed? When did they decide this? How long had they been planning my exile? What had I done that was so terrible? I ran through our recent conversations in my mind, looking for the catalyst. I couldn't find one. There was no argument, no betrayal, no crime I'd committed, just the slow, daily grind of a life where I existed to serve other people's needs. And apparently, that wasn't enough. Around midnight, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old laptop and scrolled through my financial records. I didn't know why. Some small voice inside me was asking a question I'd never asked before. How much of my life have I actually given away? What I found made me feel sick. For 23 years, since my mother's divorce when I was 19, I had been supporting her. Automatically. Without really thinking about it anymore, it had become so normal that I'd stopped seeing it as a choice. It was just what I did. The mortgage thudders $200 a month. That was me. The utilities and insurance. Another $400 a month, that was me. The groceries, the medications, the car payments for the car she drove, all me. And my sister, I'd helped her through her divorce. I'd co-signed for her apartment. When she fell behind on rent, I'd covered it. When she needed surgery, I'd paid for it. I added it all up in my head, going back year by year. Nearly 400 zlotys, $400,000. I had given my family $400,000, and in return, they had sent me a text message telling me I was no longer part of the family. I sat back in my chair, and for the first time since I'd read those words, I felt something shift inside me. The shock was fading. The hurt was still there, raw and real and deep. But underneath it, something else was waking up. It was small at first, just a whisper of a feeling, but it was growing. It was anger. Real, clean, clarifying anger. It was the kind of anger that doesn't destroy. It's the kind that builds. I didn't know it yet, but my life was about to change completely. Not because my mother and sister had rejected me, but because, in that moment, sitting alone in my apartment with the truth of my own sacrifice laid bare before me, I finally, rejected them first. I picked up my phone one more time. I took a screenshot of my mother's message. Then I did the same with the timestamp showing when Diane had liked it. I saved both images to a folder on my computer labeled with just one word evidence. Then I did something that would set everything in motion. I replied to my mother's message with 6 simple words. Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments. I hit send at 12:03 a.m. By 24:07 a.m., my phone was ringing. The phone rang and rang and rang. I stared at it, watching my mother's name appear on the screen. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then I silenced my phone entirely and set it face down on the coffee table. I needed to think. What I'd just done, canceling those automatic payments, wasn't something I could undo with a simple apology or explanation. I'd crossed a line. Or maybe, more accurately, I'd finally drawn one. My heart was racing. My palms were sweating. Part of me wanted to call her back immediately, to say I didn't mean it, to smooth things over the way I always did. That was the part of me that had been trained, over decades, to apologize for other people's behavior, to fix things that weren't my fault, to make myself smaller so that everyone else could feel bigger. But there was another part of me now, a part that had been silent for a very long time. That part was awake. I got up and walked to my bedroom. I opened the drawer in my nightstand and pulled out a small leather journal, one I'd kept since college but hadn't written in for years. I found a pen and I started to write, not a journal entry, a list. At the top of the page I wrote one word everything. Then I began to document, not in an emotional way, in a factual, chronological way, the way a person documents evidence. 1997 mom's divorce, I was 19, I moved back home to help, I was supposed to stay for 3 months, I stayed for 15 years. 1990 first mortgage payment, version 200, just until I get back on my feet, honey. 1999 second mortgage payment, and a third, and a fourth. 2008 Diane's first crisis. Her boyfriend left her. She needed help with her apartment deposit. I paid $3,000. I'm so grateful, Raksh. I'll pay you back. She never did. I kept writing, page after page, year after year, every sacrifice, every moment I'd said yes when I meant no. Every time I'd put their needs before my own. By the time I finished, my hand was cramping and I'd filled 40 pages. I closed the journal and sat on my bed, holding it in my lap. This was the moment everything became real. This wasn't a fight that could be resolved with a conversation. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with an apology. This was a fundamental truth about my life that I could no longer ignore. I had been used. Not maliciously. Not at first. But over time, what had started as helping had become expected. What had started as love had become obligation. What had started as, just for a little while, had become my entire adult identity. And my family had let it happen. They'd encouraged it. They'd built their lives around my willingness to sacrifice. The realization didn't come with anger first. It came with clarity. I understood finally why my mother had sent that message. It wasn't a spontaneous decision made in a moment of anger. It was deliberate. It was planned. And it was designed to hurt me in a very specific way. My mother needed me to know that I was disposable. Why? Because as long as I believed she needed me, I would keep giving. As long as I felt needed, I would keep sacrificing. But if she could make me feel unneeded, unwanted, unwelcome, then maybe I would finally stop. My mother had sent that message because I had gotten tired, not angry, not resentful, just tired, and tired people are unpredictable. Tired people might say no. Tired people might decide to stop. So she'd made a preemptive strike. She'd rejected me first, before I could reject her. She'd taken away my role before I could realize I didn't want it anymore. It was brilliant, actually. In a cruel, calculated way, it was brilliant. And it was also the biggest mistake she'd ever made. Because by trying to free herself from the obligation of my love, she'd accidentally freed me from the obligation of my sacrifice. My phone buzzed. I'd forgotten to silence notifications completely. A text came through from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a message, forwarded by someone I didn't immediately recognize. I opened it. It was from my mother, sent to my brother in California. The message read, "Rachel's being difficult about money. She's upset we set boundaries. Can you talk to her? She needs to understand that we have a right to our own lives." Boundaries. She was calling it boundaries. Taking money from me for 23 years was boundaries. Rejecting me via text message in front of my sister was boundaries. But me canceling the automatic payments was being difficult. I looked at who'd sent the screenshot. It was James Chen, my ex-boyfriend from 7 years ago. I hadn't heard from him in almost a year. We'd dated for 3 years, and it had been a good relationship until my mother and sister had decided he wasn't good enough for me. They'd called him controlling, manipulative, a bad influence. They'd convinced me to break up with him. And I'd been so used to listening to them, so used to prioritizing their opinions over my own happiness, that I'd done it. I'd let him go. Now, 7 years later, he was sending me evidence that my brother was involved in this coordinated rejection. The text that came with the screenshot read, "I still have your brother's number from when we used to grab beers. He reached out to me today, asking if I knew what was going on with you and your family. When he read me that message from your mom, I knew you needed to see it. I'm not involved in this, but I wanted you to know you're not alone. Call me if you need to talk. James." I sat for a long moment, holding my phone, reading those words over and over. You're not alone. When was the last time someone had said that to me and meant it? When was the last time someone had offered help without expecting something in return? I didn't call him, not yet. But I saved his message. Instead, I did something else. I opened my laptop and I started to research financial protections, legal boundaries, how to secure your assets, how to document financial abuse, because that's what this was, I realized. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the insidious kind where someone uses your love against you to extract resources indefinitely. I learned about something called financial enmeshment. It's when family members are so intertwined financially that they lose individual autonomy. It usually happens in families where there's been a power imbalance, where one person is the giver and everyone else is the taker. That was my family. I learned about the tactics that people use to keep these arrangements in place. Guilt, shame, making the giver feel selfish for wanting their own life, making the taker feel entitled to the giver's resources. It was like reading my own biography. By 3 a.m, I had a plan forming in my head. Not a revenge plan, not in the sense of wanting to hurt them, but a reclamation plan, a plan to take back my life. The first step was simple: stop the bleeding. I went to my bank's website and I removed my mother and sister from any accounts they could access. I checked all of my automatic payments, and I made a list of which ones were going to my family. Mortgage $100 $200 a month, cancelled. Utilities $400 a month, cancelled. Insurance $280 a month, cancelled. Diane's rent contribution $500 a month, cancelled. In total, I was cutting off approximately $2,380 per month. That was nearly $28,500 a year that would no longer flow from my account to theirs. I should have felt guilty. That's what my training told me I should feel. My mother had always taught me that my worth was tied to my usefulness. That love meant sacrifice. That being a good daughter meant putting everyone else's needs before my own. But as I clicked through those cancellations, confirming each one, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. For the first time in 23 years, I felt like I could breathe. I also felt something else. I felt powerful. My mother and sister had made me believe that I was weak, that I needed them, that without them, I was nothing. But the truth was the opposite. They needed me. They had built their entire lives on my willingness to support them, and I had just pulled the rug out from under them. By dawn, my phone had 17 missed calls from my mother, 9 text messages from my sister, 2 voicemails from my brother asking me to think about what I was doing. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I did something that surprised me. I called James. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting by the phone. "Rashai," I said, It's been a while. 7 years and 2 months, he said. Not that I was counting, despite everything, despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, despite the wreckage of my life that was currently imploding. I smiled. I need help, I told him. Not the kind where you fix things for me. The kind where you help me see that I'm not crazy for wanting to fix things for myself. There was a pause. Then James said, I'm on my way over. Don't move. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel alone. The realization I'd come to in the middle of the night was crystallizing into something solid, something real. I had the power to change everything. My family had thought they could control me through rejection. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. The woman sitting in this apartment at dawn, watching the sun come up over a city that suddenly felt full of possibility, was not the same woman who'd been chopping vegetables 24 hours earlier. That woman had finally woken up, and she was ready. James arrived at my apartment at 6:47 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression. He looked almost the same as he had 7 years ago. Slightly older around the eyes, a few more lines around his mouth. But there was something different about him too. A kind of settled confidence that hadn't been there before. Like he'd figured some things out in the years we'd been apart. I opened the door and didn't say anything. He just pulled me into a hug. The kind of hug that said, I know what you're going through. And I'm here anyway. Come on, he said. Let's sit down. We went to my kitchen table. My laptop was still open with all my financial records spread across it like a crime scene investigation. James looked at the screen and didn't say anything for a long moment. This is a lot, he finally said. This is everything, I corrected him. This is my entire adult life. He sat down and began to read through the documentation methodically. Page after page of automatic payments, loan transfers, emergency help. Birthday gifts that never went to me, holiday expenses I'd covered, while my family complained about the cost of the meal. After about 20 minutes, he closed the laptop and looked at me. Your family is going to panic, he said. They're going to do whatever they can to get you to reverse this. You need to prepare for that. I know, I said. No, James said firmly. I don't think you do. They're going to cry. They're going to threaten you. They're going to use guilt and manipulation and everything else they've trained you to respond to. This isn't going to be clean, Rachel. It's going to be messy. I nodded slowly. He was right. I'd canceled the payments, but I hadn't really thought through what came next. I'd been running on adrenaline and clarity, but that wasn't going to last forever. So what do? I asked. You document everything, James said. Every call, every message, every demand. You create a record, and then you don't engage emotionally. You respond factually. You don't defend your decision. You don't explain. You just hold the line. We spent the next 3 hours going through my phone and my email. James helped me create a system for documenting all communication. He taught me how to take screenshots properly, how to preserve the timestamps, how to create a timeline that would be clear and irrefutable. Why are you doing this? I asked him at one point. Helping me. After what happened between us. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I watched your family destroy you once already. They convinced you to break up with me because I supposedly wasn't good enough for you. And I let myself believe maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. But I've had 7 years to think about it, Rachel. And I realized they weren't rejecting me because I was bad for you. They were rejecting me because I was good for you. Because as long as you were with me, you had someone who wasn't dependent on you. Someone who wanted to give to the relationship instead of just take from it. He looked at me directly. They needed you broken so they could keep you useful. The words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. Absolutely, completely true. I'm not going to let them do it again, he said. Not if I can help it. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Messages were flooding in. My mother, my sister, my brother, even my aunt who I barely talked to. The first message from my mother was short. What have you done? The second was longer. Rachel, this is ridiculous. You're being emotional and irrational. We need to talk about this. Call me immediately. The third, do you understand what you've done? The mortgage payment is due in 5 days. Fivis, how am I supposed to pay it? Each message was a lever, a pressure point, a hook designed to catch me emotionally and pull me back into compliance. I showed them to James. Don't respond yet, he said. Let them panic a little more. They need to understand that you're serious. But I was already getting texts from people I knew. My cousin wanted to know if I was okay. So code 4, what did you do to make mom upset? My mother's best friend called to say she'd heard I was having some kind of breakdown. Code 4, my mother is spreading a narrative about me being unstable. The narrative, I realized, was already being written, and it wasn't going to be the truth. My mother was going to tell everyone that I was ungrateful, that I was having some kind of psychological crisis, that I'd always been selfish but finally showed my true colors, that I'd abandoned the family when they needed me most. By noon, I'd received 17 messages from people checking on me, most of them expressing concern that was clearly directed concern. That was my family's playbook: get the story out first, make yourself the victim, and make sure everyone sides with you before the other person can even explain their side. But this time, I wasn't going to play along. James was still at my apartment. We ordered lunch and continued to organize my documentation. He helped me create a spreadsheet that tracked every single automatic payment I'd made for the past 5 years. We color-coded it: mortgage in red, utilities in blue, Diane's expenses in green, medical bills in yellow. The visual was staggering, wave after wave of red and blue and green flowing out of my account into theirs. "What's your plan?" James asked. "Do you want to tell them why you're doing this? Do you want to confront them?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Then don't decide right now," he said. "Decisions made in crisis mode are rarely the best ones. Give yourself time to think this through. What do you actually want to accomplish here?" I thought about that question for a long time. "I want them to understand what they've done," I said finally. "I want them to know that it wasn't okay, and I want to make sure they can never do this to me again." "Okay," James said. "That's 3 different things. Let's work through each one." By 3 o'clock that afternoon, James had to leave. He had a job to get to, a life of his own that he'd stepped away from to help me. But before he left, he made me promise 3 things. 1, I would not respond to any messages from my family for at least 24 hours. 2, I would document everything that came in during that time. 3, I would call him if I started to weaken. I promised. After he left, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. The afternoon stretched out before me, and I could feel the pull of my phone. Every notification that came in was like a hook, trying to drag me back. My mother had moved on from demanding explanations to full panic mode. "Rachel, this isn't funny." I called the bank. They said the payment wasn't processed. "Did you cancel it?" "Anstar me. Diane is hysterical. She doesn't know what she's going to do about her apartment. I'm disappointed in you. I raised you better than this. A good daughter doesn't abandon her mother. Your brother thinks you're having a nervous breakdown. Should we be concerned?" Each message was designed to trigger a response. Panic, guilt, shame, a fear of being labeled crazy. But I didn't respond. Instead, I took screenshots of each message. I noted the timestamps. I saved them to my folder labeled Evidence. By evening, the messages had shifted tone again. Now my mother was trying a different angle. "Honey, I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings. But you need to understand. We were just trying to set boundaries. We didn't mean to reject you. We love you. Please just put the payments back and we can talk about this." The apology without understanding. The love without respect. The request to fix it all without actually addressing what was broken. I stared at that message for a long time. This was the moment that would define everything. This was where I could take the easy path. Apologize, put the payments back, slip back into the comfortable misery of being needed and used and never truly valued. Or I could hold the line. I thought about James's words. They needed you broken so they could keep you useful. I thought about my documentation. 23 years of sacrifice. I thought about the moment my mother sent that first message. "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family." She hadn't sent that message in anger. She'd sent it strategically. To hurt me. To scare me. To remind me that my place in the family was conditional on my usefulness. Well, I wasn't useful anymore. And that was going to be their problem to solve, not mine. I got up and walked to my bedroom. I opened the drawer in my nightstand and pulled out that leather journal where I'd documented everything. I opened to the first page and read the heading again. Everything. And then I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but something that felt absolutely necessary in that moment. I recorded a video message. Not to send to my family yet, just to myself. To document my mindset, my reasoning, my commitment to what I was doing. I looked into the camera on my laptop and I said, "My name is Rachel Mitchell. It's March 15th at 8:47 p.m. I'm documenting this because I want to remember this moment. The moment I decided that my life belonged to me and not to my family. I'm not doing this because I don't love them. I'm doing this because I love myself. And I refused to sacrifice myself anymore. To anyone, for any reason. I hit stop on the recording and saved it. By the time I went to bed that night, there were 43 unread messages on my phone. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I set an alarm for tomorrow, turned my phone to silent, and I slept. For the first time in 23 years, I slept without guilt. The next morning, I woke up to the reality that everything had changed. My mother's mortgage payment was now 4 days overdue. Diane had called the bank 17 times asking if the payment would process. My brother had sent an email to my entire extended family explaining that I was going through something and asking them to be patient with me during this difficult time. The narrative was being crafted. I was the problem. I was the unstable one. I was the one having a crisis. But I knew the truth, and I had the evidence to prove it. The real chaos was just beginning. The calls started on day 3. Not text messages anymore. Actual phone calls. My mother calling every 2 hours. My sister calling in between. My brother calling with a different tone, less anger, more desperation. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I created a new document on my computer. I titled it Timeline of Contact Attempts. Every call that came in got logged. Time caller. Duration if they left a voicemail. I was building a record of the pressure campaign, of the attempt to manipulate me back into submission through sheer persistence. James called me that morning. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if I'm wrong about this? What if I'm actually the bad person here?" "Who are you?" he asked. "Am I what? The bad person? Did you abuse them financially? Did you control them with money? Did you extract resources from them while pretending to love them?" "No," I said quietly. "Then you're not the bad person," James said. "The guilt you're feeling isn't a sign that you're wrong. It's a sign that they trained you well. Guilt is their primary tool, Rachel. Free. They weaponized it against you so effectively that now it's the first thing you reach for when you're not behaving the way they want." After we hung up, I made a decision. I was going to break my silence, but not with emotion, not with explanation, just with facts. I waited until evening, and then I sent a single message to my mother, my sister, and my brother. The same message to all 3 of them. I have decided to discontinue all automatic payments effective immediately. This is permanent. I will not be reversing this decision. I am happy to discuss this in writing at a neutral location with a mediator present. Otherwise, I'm asking you to please stop contacting me. All further communication should be in writing only. It was clinical. It was clear. It left no room for negotiation or emotional manipulation. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. My mother, my sister, my brother, all calling simultaneously. I didn't answer. I let them all go to voicemail. Then I did something I'd been thinking about for days. I opened my bank account and I transferred my entire savings into a separate account that only I had access to. I was separating myself financially in every way possible. The voicemails came pouring in. My mother's message: "Rachel, this is blackmail. This is financial coercion. Do you understand that? We could call the police. We could press charges." She couldn't. There were no charges to press. But the threat itself was the point. It was meant to terrify me. My sister's message: "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think cutting us off proves something? All you've done is prove you're a selfish bitch. Mom's in tears, she can't sleep. You're killing her." The emotional hostage taking. The implication that her suffering was my responsibility. My brother's message: "Rach, I don't understand what's happening here. Mom says you're having some kind of breakdown. She's genuinely worried you need psychiatric help. Can we talk about this?" So the reframing. Making my boundaries seem like symptoms of mental illness. I listened to each one once. Then I saved them all to my evidence folder. The next day, a letter arrived. It was from my mother, sent via certified mail. I had to sign for it. The formality of it, the legal weight of it, told me this had escalated beyond just family drama. I opened it carefully and read it. "Rachel, I am writing this letter to inform you that your actions have caused me severe financial hardship and emotional distress. The mortgage payment you have refused to make has resulted in late fees and penalties. I am facing potential foreclosure. This is not acceptable. I have consulted with a lawyer, and I want you to know that I am prepared to take legal action if you do not immediately resume the mortgage payments and compensate me for the damages you have caused. Furthermore, I am prepared to tell anyone and everyone about your abandonment of this family during a time of crisis. I will ensure that people know what kind of daughter you truly are. This is your last warning." Mum, I read it 3 times. Each time I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't a moment of reconciliation. This wasn't a moment of the family coming to their senses. This was a threat. This was a power play. This was my mother pulling out the big guns, trying to scare me into compliance. And the irony was so clear to me now. She was proving my point. She was proving that our relationship had never been about love. It had always been about control. She was showing me exactly who she was. I called James immediately. "Your mother just sent me a threat letter," I said, and I read it to him. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "That's actually good news." "How is that good news?" "Because now you have a paper trail. She's documented her own behavior. This letter, combined with everything else you've been collecting, tells a very clear story. It's the story of someone using love and family obligation as a weapon to extract resources and maintain control." "What do I do?" I asked. "We need to talk to a lawyer," he said. "Not to sue her necessarily, but to understand your legal position, to know what you can and can't do, to make sure you're protected." By the end of that week, I had retained a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Wong, and she was the kind of lawyer who didn't pull punches. "Your mother's threat to tell people about your behavior is not a legal threat," she told me during our first meeting. "But her threat to take legal action against you might be. However, she doesn't have a case. You had no legal obligation to pay her mortgage. You were doing it voluntarily. Stopping voluntary support is not illegal." "What about the emotional damage she's claiming?" I asked. Patricia smiled. "That's not a legal claim, that's manipulation. She's trying to make you feel guilty so you'll give her what she wants. The fact that she's willing to put that in writing is actually evidence of emotional coercion." "So I'm safe." "You're safe," Patricia confirmed. "She can try to sue you. She probably won't because she'd lose, but even if she did, she'd lose. What I want you to understand is this. Your mother is desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. They make threats, they spread lies, they try to turn people against you. This is going to get worse before it gets better." She was right. By week 2, the campaign had expanded. My mother had started calling my workplace. She told my HR department that I was unstable and possibly a danger to myself. I had to have a meeting with HR to explain that no, I was not having a breakdown. My mother was upset because I had stopped financially supporting her. My aunt, my mother's sister, called me to say that our extended family was very concerned about my behavior and that I needed to think about what I was doing to my poor mother. My childhood best friend reached out to say that she'd heard I'd cut off my family and she wanted to know if I was okay. It was like watching a spider web being spun around me. Every strand was designed to isolate me, to make me question myself, to pull me back in. But I had James, and I had Patricia, and I had my evidence. Mostly, I had clarity, because here's what I understood in week 2 that I hadn't understood before. My family didn't want me to succeed. They needed me to fail. My success, my independence, my boundaries, my refusal to be controlled, was a threat to them. As long as I was sacrificing for them, they could feel like victims of circumstance, free, not agents of their own lives. As long as I was supporting them, they could avoid taking responsibility for their own futures. As long as I was broken, they could feel justified in using me. But now I was broken no longer, and that terrified them. The turning point came on day 18. I was at work, sitting at my desk, when my phone rang. It was my sister. I almost didn't answer. We'd agreed to written communication only. But something made me pick up. "Rachel." Diane's voice was different, softer, almost defeated. "Hi," I said carefully. "The house." "Mom's going to lose the house," Diane said without preamble. "The bank sent a notice. She has 60 days to catch up the payments or they're starting foreclosure proceedings." "I know," I said. "You know." Diane's voice cracked. "Rachel, she's going to be homeless. Our mother is going to be homeless. How can you be okay with that?" This was the moment. This was the exact lever that was supposed to break me. I took a breath. "Your mother is going to be okay," I said quietly. "She has options. She can sell the house. She can downsize. She can go back to work. She's 68 years old, not 98. She's fully capable of providing for herself. She's just never had to because I've been doing it for her." "You sound cold," Diane said. "You sound like a stranger." "I sound like someone who finally values herself," I corrected. "I sound like someone who understands that I don't have to sacrifice my life to prove my love. I'm sorry if that disappoints you." "Who never meant to hurt you," Diane said, and there was a sob in her voice now. "Yes, you did," I said. "Not consciously, maybe. But yes, you did. Mom sent me a message saying I was no longer part of the family. That wasn't an accident, Diane. That was deliberate. And now you're all upset because there are consequences. So that's it? Diane asked. We're over. Our family is over. No, I said. Our family is over when it became about extracting resources instead of about love. I'm just being honest about that now. I hung up after that. Diane didn't call back. That evening, I got a message from my brother. I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think you're right. I think Mom and Diane have been taking advantage of you. I should have said something a long time ago. I'm sorry. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, I'm here. It was a small thing. A message from a brother who'd been complicit in the dysfunction, but was finally willing to see it. But it was also a crack in the facade. My mother's reaction, when she realized she'd lost the support of my brother, was swift and brutal. She sent another letter. This one was addressed to me, but it was also CC'd to every member of our extended family. It was a public narrative. It said, "My children have all abandoned me in my time of need. Rachel cut off financial support without warning. My brother has taken her side. Diane is too young to understand what she's doing. I have no one. I am a mother without children. I hope they can live with that." It was a masterpiece of emotional blackmail, and it was also, inadvertently, a confession. She was admitting that her entire relationship with me was transactional. She was admitting that I was valuable to her only insofar as I served her needs. I saved that letter too. By the end of week 3, the reality had settled in for my family. The house was going to be lost. My mother was going to have to make hard choices. Diane was going to have to provide for herself, and I was not going to rescue them. The calls and letters and manipulation attempts didn't stop completely, but they did slow down. The panic had settled into something else: resignation. My mother called once more. Just her, no threats, no demands. "I think I understand now," she said quietly. "What I did to you, I think I finally see it." I didn't respond immediately. I waited to see if this was another tactic. "I used you," she continued. "I let you believe that your worth was tied to your usefulness. And when I got scared that you might leave, I pushed you away first. I thought if I rejected you, it would hurt less." It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. "Yes," I said. "You did. I'm sorry," she said. And I believed her. But I also understood that sorry didn't change what had happened. Sorry didn't get back the 23 years. Sorry didn't undo the damage. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I let it happen for so long." "What happens now?" my mother asked. "Now," I said, "we'll both figure out who we are without each other." I hung up after that, and in the silence that followed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt at peace. The reckoning wasn't about hurting my family. It was about telling the truth, and the truth, it turned out, was enough. By week 4, I had made a decision. I was going to tell my story publicly, not out of bitterness, not to destroy my family's reputation, but because I'd started to realize something during this entire ordeal. I wasn't alone. After my mother's confession letter went to the extended family, I started hearing from cousins, aunts, and even a few strangers who'd somehow learned about my situation. They all had similar stories, not identical, but the patterns were unmistakable. A cousin who'd been supporting her adult son financially for 15 years only to be told she was controlling and emotionally abusive when she asked him to get a job. An uncle who'd paid for his sister's business startup only to be cut out of the family when the business became successful and she no longer needed him. A woman from church who'd overheard me talking to Patricia about my situation and called me to say her daughter had done the exact same thing to her. Cut off financial support and been painted as the villain. These stories kept coming, and each one broke my heart because I recognized the pattern so clearly now. Financial enmeshment, emotional manipulation, the weaponization of love. The guilt that was used to keep givers compliant and takers comfortable. This wasn't just my family's dysfunction. This was something systemic, something that happened in families everywhere, and nobody was talking about it. I called James one evening and told him what I was thinking. "I want to document everything," I said, "not just for me, for other people, so they can see the pattern, so they can understand what's happening to them." "Okay," James said. "What does that look like?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I have all the evidence, the messages, the letters, the timeline, the financial documentation. I'm thinking maybe I could write it down, tell the story, help people see how this works." James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You realize this will probably end any chance of reconciliation with your family. If you make this public, they'll see it as the ultimate betrayal." "I know," I said. "But that's what I'm choosing. I'm choosing to help other people instead of protecting my family's reputation. It was a pivotal moment, not in my personal story, but in my transformation. Because at that moment, I realized I had fully separated myself from the role my family had assigned me. I was no longer the daughter whose job was to protect them and take care of them and make them look good. I was the woman whose job was to tell the truth. Over the next few days, I organized all of my evidence into a comprehensive document. I created sections, the financial record, 23 years of automatic payments, loans, emergency help, gifts, all of it documented, all of it totaling nearly 400,000, the communication record, the text messages, the voicemails, the letters, all of it showing the progression from subtle manipulation to explicit threats. The timeline of events, the rejection message, the cancellation, the panic, the escalation, the eventual confession, the patterns, the specific tactics used, the gaslighting, the guilt tripping, the threats, the narrative manipulation, the public shaming, the legal context. Patricia had helped me understand that what had happened to me had a legal name: financial abuse. It's not always prosecuted, but it's a recognized form of emotional abuse. But I also included something else. The reflection. My own examination of how I'd let this happen. How I'd been trained by my parents' divorce to believe that my worth was tied to my usefulness. How I'd internalized the message that love meant sacrifice. How I'd confused obligation with love. This wasn't about blaming only my family. It was about understanding the entire ecosystem that had allowed this dysfunction to continue for so long. I sent a draft to James and Patricia. Patricia called me the next day. "Rachel, this is powerful," she said. "Have you thought about what you want to do with this?" "I want to help people," I said. "I want to share it somehow. I want other people to see the pattern." "Then I think you should publish it," Patricia said. "Put it out there. Let people read it. You're not saying anything that isn't true. You're not making anything up. This is your story, and it's an important one." "Won't my family sue me?" I asked nervously. "For what?" Patricia asked. "Everything you've documented is accurate. The messages are real. The timeline is accurate. The financial records are real. If anything, publishing this might actually protect you legally because it establishes that you're being truthful. You're not hiding anything." James was more cautious. "Your family is going to read this and feel exposed," he said. "They're going to be angry. Some people are going to judge you. But Rachel, people who matter will understand." So I did it. I wrote an essay, not a long, rambling rant. A clear, well-documented essay about financial enmeshment in families, about how love gets weaponized, about the patterns of manipulation, and yes, about my own family's specific situation, but only as an example of something much larger. I published it on a personal blog. I shared it on social media. I sent it to a few publications that focus on family dynamics and emotional health. The response came immediately. Some of it was supportive. People writing to say they'd experienced the same thing, that they felt less alone, that my story had helped them understand their own family dysfunction. But some of it was harsh. Strangers on the internet calling me ungrateful, saying I was disrespecting my elders, saying I should have just kept supporting my family because that's what real love is. My mother saw it. Of course she saw it. Within hours, she'd sent me a message. "How could you do this to me? How could you put our family business on the internet for the world to judge us? I thought I'd already hurt you enough. I didn't think you'd hurt me like this." It stung. Even knowing what I knew about her, it still stung. But I didn't respond. I'd made a choice. I was telling the truth. And the truth sometimes hurt. That was okay. What surprised me was my brother's response. He called me. Not texted. Actually called. "Rachel, I read what you wrote," he said. My heart sank. I prepared myself for criticism. "I showed it to my therapist," he continued. "And she said something that made me understand why I wasn't seeing what was happening for so long. She said that people who've been raised in dysfunctional families often become blind to the dysfunction because they've normalized it. They're so used to the pattern that they don't recognize it as wrong." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for not standing up for you sooner. I'm sorry for going along with Mom's narrative. I'm sorry for calling you and suggesting you were having a breakdown when really, you were the only one being sane." I started to cry, not sad tears. Relief tears. "It's okay," I said. "You see it now. That's what matters." "I want to do something," my brother said. "I want to reach out to Diane. I want to help her understand what's happening. I want to try to fix this if I can." "You can't fix it for her," I said. "She has to see it for herself. But I appreciate you trying." Over the following weeks, something shifted in my family. My brother did reach out to Diane. He sent her the essay and he talked to her about his own therapy and his own understanding of what had happened to all of us. Diane didn't respond immediately. But a month later, she called me. "I've been reading what you wrote," she said. "And I've been thinking about my own life, about why I was so angry at you. And I realized I was angry because you had something I didn't." "What?" I asked. "Independence," she said. "You had the courage to stand up and say no, and I didn't. I was so comfortable being taken care of that I never developed the skills to take care of myself. And when you took that away, instead of being grateful for the push I needed, I was angry at you. I didn't say anything, I just listened. I'm sorry," Diane continued. "I'm sorry for the things I said. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. And I'm sorry that it took you doing something this dramatic for me to finally see what was happening. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was a beginning." My mother, though, remained distant. She read the essay. She saw the comments from people who understood and supported me, and instead of having her own moment of clarity, she seemed to retreat further. "Patricia told me this was normal. Some people," she said, "are never going to take responsibility for their behavior. They're going to blame you, and they're going to paint themselves as the victim. You have to be okay with that." So I was. But something interesting happened once I made the essay public. I started getting messages from people who said my story had changed their lives, that they'd been in the same situation and didn't know how to get out, that my documentation of the process, the cancellation, the boundaries setting, the refusal to engage with manipulation, had given them a blueprint for their own freedom. A woman named Susan wrote, "I've been supporting my mother for 15 years. Your story made me realize I'm not crazy for wanting it to stop. I'm going to do what you did. Thank you for showing me it's possible." Another woman named Maria wrote, "I'm in year 10 of financially supporting my adult children. I always thought this was what love looked like. Your essay helped me understand that love doesn't mean losing yourself. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm terrified, but I'm going to do it." An older man named Robert wrote, "I've been estranged from my children for 5 years because I refused to keep supporting their addictions. I thought I was a monster. Your story helped me understand that sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do." With each message, I felt more certain about my decision to share. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. This was taking my pain and my experience and transforming it into something that could help other people. I compiled all of the messages I received into a document. I created a resource guide for people in similar situations. I researched therapists who specialize in family trauma and financial enmeshment. I compiled legal resources. I put together a guide for having boundary conversations. Essentially, I created a roadmap for people who were ready to break free from the same patterns that had trapped me. James saw what I was doing and he said, "You realize you're turning your personal vendetta into a movement, right?" "It's not a vendetta anymore," I said. "It stopped being personal when I realized how many other people were going through the same thing." "Exactly," James said. "You're no longer fighting your family. You're fighting for something larger. That's powerful." By the end of month 2, my essay had been shared over 50,000 times. It had been picked up by several publications focused on family dynamics and mental health. I'd been asked to write follow-up pieces. I'd been contacted by producers from a podcast about family dysfunction who wanted to interview me. My life had transformed, and the irony was beautiful. My family had tried to control my narrative by rejecting me publicly. They'd tried to make me seem crazy and ungrateful. But instead of that destroying me, I'd taken control of my own narrative. I'd told the truth, and the truth had set me free. My mother, watching from a distance, must have realized what had happened. Her attempt to shame me into compliance had backfired spectacularly. Instead of being shamed, I'd been liberated. Near the end of month 2, Patricia received a call from my mother's lawyer. Apparently, my mother wanted to discuss the possibility of a settlement. She was afraid I was going to sue her. She wanted to negotiate terms that would include me taking down the essay. Patricia told me about the call with a slightly amused expression. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I told them that you had no intention of suing," Patricia said, "and that you had every legal right to share your story. I also told them that if your mother tried to threaten you or coerce you into removing the essay, that would constitute further harassment and would strengthen any future case against her." "So it's over?" I asked. "It's over," Patricia confirmed. Your mother has officially given up trying to control you. Now she's just trying to damage control." That night, I sat on my couch with James, and we looked back at everything that had happened. From the text message that said I was no longer part of the family, to this moment was exactly 45 days. 45 days to dismantle a 23-year-old pattern. 45 days to go from victim to survivor to advocate. 45 days to reclaim my life. "How do you feel?" James asked. "Powerful," I said. "Not because I hurt my family, but because I saved myself. And in saving myself, I helped other people." James took my hand. "That," he says, "true revenge." 3 months after that first text message, I was sitting in an office I'd just rented. Not my apartment anymore. A real office space. 800 square feet with windows that overlooked the city and a door that closed. My name was on a plaque outside. Rachel Mitchell, Family Systems Consultant. I still had my regular job. But I'd started a side practice helping people who were caught in the same patterns my family had been caught in. People who were financially supporting relatives who were emotionally abusing them. People who had confused love with sacrifice. People who needed help untangling themselves. The response had been overwhelming. In the first month, I had 30 inquiries. By the third month, I had a waiting list of 90 people. I wasn't a therapist. I'd made that clear on my website. But I was a guide. I'd been through it. I understood the patterns. I could help people see the situation clearly and give them tools for setting boundaries and protecting themselves. Most importantly, I could tell them, "You're not crazy. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're just finally recognizing that you deserve to have a life too." One afternoon, a woman came to my office. Her name was Claire, and she was 53 years old. She sat across from me with her hands shaking and her eyes full of unshed tears. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 6 months," she said. "Ever since I told her I couldn't pay for her rent anymore. She said I was a terrible mother. She said I didn't love her. And now all I can think about is whether I made a mistake. Whether I should just go back to supporting her." I nodded. I'd heard this story in many variations. "Tell me about it," I said gently. For the next hour, Claire told me her story. She'd been supporting her adult daughter for 8 years. The daughter had gone to college but then couldn't find a job she liked. Then she found a boyfriend. Then the boyfriend wasn't working either. Then they wanted to travel. Then they needed help with medical bills. 8 years of enabling. 8 years of rescuing. 8 years of her daughter not learning to be an adult. When Claire finally said no, the daughter exploded. Called her selfish. Told everyone in the family that Claire didn't care. Played the victim so effectively that Claire's own mother started questioning whether Claire was doing the right thing. "The guilt is killing me," Claire said. "I know she needs to learn to be independent, but I can't stop thinking about her struggling." "She needs to struggle," I said carefully. "That's actually where growth happens. When we rescue people from their struggles, we rob them of the opportunity to develop resilience." "But what if she can't do it?" Claire asked. "What if she really can't make it on her own? Then she'll find help elsewhere," I said. "From a job, from social services, from a boyfriend who actually contributes, from somewhere other than her mother." I walked Claire through the same journey I'd taken. The documentation, the boundary setting, the refusal to engage with manipulation, the acceptance that she couldn't control her daughter's response. She could only control her own choices. By the end of our session, Claire was crying, but they were different tears. Clear tears. Tears of relief. "I needed someone to tell me I'm not a monster," she said. "You're not," I told her. "You're a mother who loves her daughter enough to let her grow up." Sessions like this became my life. One person after another, all recognizing the pattern, all ready to break free, all terrified of the consequences. I helped them through it. I didn't do it for them. That was important. I helped them see what they already knew to be true. That their love had been weaponized. That their sacrifice had been exploited. That they had a right to their own lives. But my work wasn't just one-on-one sessions. I started writing articles for psychology publications, essays for parenting blogs, a series on financial enmeshment that went viral and was shared over 200,000 times. I did podcast interviews where I talked about the patterns and the warning signs. I created videos explaining how to have boundary conversations with family members. I compiled resources, therapists, books, support groups, all designed to help people navigate these situations. And through it all, I kept thinking about James. One evening, about 4 months after the initial rejection, James came over to my apartment for dinner. I'd been cooking more lately. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Cooking had become a pleasure instead of an obligation. We sat on my couch with wine and pizza, and James said, "You've changed. For the better, I hope?" I asked. "Dramatically for the better," he said. "The woman I knew 7 years ago was always apologizing, always trying to make everyone happy, always diminishing herself. I was trained to do that," I said. "I know," James said. "But you're not doing it anymore. You're just yourself. Completely, unapologetically yourself." "Thank you," I said. "For what? For not giving up on me," I said. "Even after I chose my family over you. Even after I let them convince me to break up with you. You still showed up when I needed you." James was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Rachel, I'm going to say something and I want you to really hear it," he said. "I never stopped loving you. Not in 7 years. Not for a single day. And I know this is not the time or the place, and we're still figuring things out. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to try again." I looked at him. This man who'd been pushed out of my life by people who didn't want me to have my own happiness. This man who'd come back anyway, without complaint, without resentment, just out of genuine care. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "After what I just went through with my family, I'm terrified of depending on anyone." "I'm not asking you to depend on me," James said. "I'm asking you to let me be part of your life, as an equal, not as a savior, not as someone you need to take care of, just as a partner." "Okay," I said. "Let's try." That night, we didn't rush into anything. We just sat together, talking about the future, about what we both wanted, about how we could build something healthy and balanced. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I could breathe. Meanwhile, my family was having to reckon with the reality of my boundaries. My mother had eventually sold the house. She'd downsized to a small apartment that she could afford on her own. It was a humbling experience for her, I'm sure. But also, it was necessary. She'd spent so many years living beyond her means, supported by my sacrifice, that she'd never had to develop financial responsibility. Now she had to. My sister had gotten a job. A real job with a real salary. She was living within her means for the first time in her adult life. She called me one day to tell me about it, and there was pride in her voice. "I never thought I could do this," Diane said. "I always thought I wasn't capable of being independent." "You were capable all along," I told her. "You just never had to be." "I'm sorry," Diane said, and I believed her. "I know," I said. "And I forgive you. But that doesn't mean we go back to how we were. We start over. We build something new, something healthier." It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a beginning. My brother had actually thrived with the new boundaries. He'd been so used to playing peacemaker that he'd never developed his own identity. But now, without the family drama constantly demanding his attention, he'd started his own business. He'd started dating someone he actually loved instead of someone the family approved of. He'd started living his own life. "Thank you for blowing everything up," he told me one day, seriously. "If you hadn't done this, I'd still be stuck in the middle, trying to make everyone happy." My mother, though, was struggling. She'd called me a few weeks after the house sale, and her voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I don't know who I am without being a mother," she said. "That must be scary," I said gently. "You spent so long defining yourself that way." "It is," she admitted. "And I don't know if I can fix what I did to you. I don't know if you'll ever really forgive me. I'm working on it," I said honestly. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me, because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I deserve to be at peace." "I understand," she said quietly. "We didn't have a tearful reconciliation. We didn't magically repair a 23-year relationship in one phone call. But we did start to talk. Not about the past constantly, but about the present. About who we were becoming now that the old patterns were broken. It was slow. It was uncomfortable sometimes. But it was honest. By 6 months after the rejection text, my life looked completely different. I had my office where I was helping dozens of people break free from financial enmeshment. I had my writing, which had been published in several major publications and had helped thousands more. I had James, and we were building something real and healthy. I had a relationship with my brother that was based on mutual respect instead of codependency. I had a tentative, fragile, but growing connection with my sister. And I had a slowly evolving understanding with my mother, not friendship exactly, but something quieter, something more honest. I'd also done something else that surprised me. I'd started saving money, real money. For the first time in my adult life, I had a savings account that was just for me. I wasn't spending every penny on my family's needs. I was building security for myself. I'd taken a vacation, just me and James, to a beach town where nobody knew my family history and I could just be Rachel. Just a woman enjoying her life. I'd made new friends. People who knew me not as the woman who sacrificed everything, but as the woman who had the courage to stand up for herself. I'd learned to say no without guilt. I'd learned to put myself first without shame. I'd learned that love doesn't have to mean self-destruction. One evening, I was sitting in my office, reviewing notes from a session with a new client, and I thought about how much I'd changed. 6 months ago, I was chopping vegetables in my apartment, feeling like my entire identity was wrapped up in being useful to people who didn't appreciate me. Now I was building a life that was completely my own. And the irony that made me smile was this: my family had thought they were punishing me when they rejected me. They thought they were cutting me off as a consequence for not being useful anymore. But they'd actually given me the greatest gift they could have given me. They'd given me permission to leave. Not explicit permission, never that, but in their desperation to control me, in their attempt to hurt me before I could hurt them, they'd accidentally set me free. I'd taken that freedom and I'd built something beautiful from it. A life that was mine, a career that was mine, a future that was mine, and that, I realized, was the most perfect form of revenge. Not hurting them, not destroying them, not even proving them wrong, just thriving without them, just being so completely, unapologetically happy that their rejection became irrelevant. 1 year after the rejection text, I was standing in my office on a Tuesday afternoon when my mother called. Not texted. Actually called. It had been 3 months since we'd last spoken. The conversations between us had become less frequent over time, not out of anger, but out of a natural settling into our separate lives. We were learning how to be a mother and daughter without the dysfunction, and that took time, lots of time. "Hi, Mom," I said, answering the phone cautiously. "Hi, honey," she said. Her voice was different these days, smaller maybe, or just more honest. "I wanted to call you because, well, I read your latest article." My heart tensed. My most recent piece had been specifically about mothers who use emotional manipulation to control their adult children. It was based on research, but it was also very much based on her. "What did you think?" I asked carefully. There was a long pause. Then my mother said something I never expected to hear from her. "I think you described me perfectly," she said quietly. "And I think I finally understand what I did to you." I sat down in my chair. This moment had seemed impossible for so long. "I'm not going to make excuses," my mother continued. "I know I can't undo the years. I know I hurt you. But I want you to know that I'm in therapy now. Real therapy. Not just going through the motions. And my therapist has been helping me understand why I did what I did." "Why did you?" I asked, not to be harsh, but because I genuinely wanted to understand. "Because I was terrified," my mother said. "After the divorce, I felt like I'd failed. Failed as a wife. Failed at providing for my children. Failed at being the person I thought I was supposed to be. And you were always so capable, so willing to help. And I think I started to believe that if I kept you busy taking care of me, I didn't have to face my own failure. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I made you carry my shame," she said. "And I'm so sorry for that." "I know," I said gently. "And I accept your apology? Does that mean we can have a relationship?" my mother asked. "I understand if you don't want to, if you'd rather just move on, but I wanted to ask." "Yes," I said. "But it's going to be different. It can't be what it was." "I know," my mother said. "I don't want it to be what it was." What it was wasn't love. It was dependence pretending to be love. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, just thinking. This was not the ending I had imagined a year ago. A year ago, when I was canceling payments and cutting off contact, I'd imagined my family learning a harsh lesson and me walking away completely. I'd imagined clear victory and permanent separation. But life was messier than that, and more hopeful than that. My family hadn't been destroyed by my boundaries. They'd been liberated by them. They'd been forced to grow, to face themselves, to change, and I had changed too. I was no longer the woman who believed that love meant self-sacrifice. I was no longer the woman who confused obligation with affection. I was no longer the woman who believed her worth was tied to her usefulness. I was Rachel. Just Rachel. A woman with boundaries and dreams and a life that belonged entirely to herself. That evening, I met James for dinner at a restaurant we'd started going to regularly. It had become our place. Nothing fancy, but the staff knew us and they always had a good table by the window. "How was your day?" he asked as we settled in. "My mother called," I said. "She said she read my article. She said she understands what she did to me." James set down his menu and looked at me. "How do you feel about that?" "Complicated," I admitted. "I want to believe her. I think I do believe her. But I also know that understanding something and actually changing are two different things." "True," James said. "But at least she's trying. That's more than she was doing 6 months ago." "It is," I agreed. We ordered dinner and talked about other things. About his business. About my waiting list for clients, which had grown to nearly 200 people now. About the book proposal I just received from a major publisher asking me to write a comprehensive guide about family enmeshment. "Are you going to do it?" James asked. "I think so," I said. "I think there are a lot of people who need to understand these patterns. Who need to know they're not alone." "You could change a lot of lives," James said. "I already am," I said, and I meant it. By now, my work had expanded beyond my initial expectations. The essay I'd published a year ago had been shared over 1 million times. I'd been interviewed by major news outlets about family dynamics and financial abuse. I'd spoken at universities and professional conferences. People recognized me on the street sometimes and thanked me for sharing my story. But more importantly, I had concrete evidence of impact. Susan, the woman who'd written to me after reading my essay, had successfully set boundaries with her mother and was now back in school pursuing a degree she'd always wanted. Maria had started a support group for people in similar situations, and it now had over 500 members. Robert had reconciled with one of his children and was working on repairing the others. These were real lives changed. Real people freed from the same patterns that had trapped me. One afternoon, a young woman came into my office. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23. "I read your story," she said, "and I realize that's happening to me. My mother keeps asking me for money. When I say no, she makes me feel guilty. When I give in, she never stops asking." I recognized myself in her immediately, but she was so young. She was just beginning her adult life, and already the patterns were forming. "I want to teach you something," I told her. "I want to teach you how to break this now, before it becomes a 23-year pattern like it was for me." We spent an hour together, and I gave her the tools I'd wish someone had given me at her age. The language for saying no. The understanding of what guilt actually means and where it comes from. The recognition that her worth wasn't tied to her usefulness. When she left my office, she was standing taller. She was breathing easier. "Thank you," she said at the door. I thought I was going crazy. "You're not," I told her. "You're just learning to see clearly. And now that you can see it, you can change it." That's what my work had become. Not revenge, not punishment, but liberation. Teaching people to see the patterns that had been invisible to them, helping them understand that they had a choice. 6 months into my second year after the rejection text, something remarkable happened. I received an email from my sister. Not just a casual check-in, a formal request to meet with me and our therapist. Yes, we'd started seeing a family therapist together to discuss the possibility of reconciliation. When we met, Diane was nervous. She had a piece of paper in her hands that she'd clearly prepared in advance. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," she said. "And I've been thinking about my role in it. I wasn't just a victim of Mom's manipulation. I was complicit. I liked your message. I went along with her narrative, and I think I did that because I was jealous of you." "Jealous of me?" I asked, surprised. "You were independent," Diane said. "You had your own life, your own career, your own everything. And I had Mom, and I thought that meant you were selfish for not including us in your life. But now I realize you were just living. You were just being a normal adult. And I resented you for it." It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard my sister say. "I'm sorry," she continued. "I'm sorry for the things I said. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. And I'm sorry it took you literally dismantling our family structure for me to finally grow up and become my own person." Our therapist looked at me. "How do you want to respond to that?" she asked. "I accept your apology," I said to my sister. "And I'm proud of you for doing the work to understand your own part in this. Does that mean we can try again?" Diane asked. "As sisters, not as victim and abuser, just as two people who want to have a real relationship." "Yes," I said. "I think we can." It wasn't instant healing. We still had work to do. We were still learning how to relate to each other without the old dynamics. But it was real, it was honest, and it was hopeful. By the end of my second year, the landscape of my family had transformed completely. My mother had moved into a small but comfortable apartment. She'd started volunteering at a local nonprofit. She was making her own friends instead of just living vicariously through her children. We had brunch together once a month. It was nice. Not intense, just nice. My sister and I had started doing things together again. Movie nights, shopping trips, real friendship instead of obligation. My brother had become my closest confidant. He understood what had happened in a way nobody else could. We talked regularly about healing and growth, and the complicated process of untangling family dysfunction. And James and I had gotten engaged. I wore my grandmother's ring. My mother had given it to me, and it felt symbolic. Something passed down that I'd chosen to keep, but that I was going to redefine on my own terms. We were planning a small wedding, just family and close friends. Not the obligation-filled spectacle that family weddings often became, but something that felt true to us. Something that reflected the life we were building together. The night before my wedding, I sat in my apartment, one of several nice things I now owned completely on my own, and I thought about how far I'd come. 1 year ago, I was sitting in an apartment eating dinner alone, devastated by a rejection text. Now I was about to marry a man who loved me for exactly who I was. I had a thriving career that helped hundreds of people. I had family relationships based on mutual respect instead of obligation. I had financial security. I had friends who valued me. I had peace. I pulled up that original rejection text on my phone and I read it one more time. "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family. Don't come to any gatherings." My sister liked the message. I replied, "Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments." That text had felt like a death sentence at the time, but it had actually been an invitation to a new life. My family hadn't meant to free me, but they had. By rejecting me, they'd given me permission to reject the patterns that had been keeping all of us stuck. The real victory wasn't in hurting them. It was in healing myself. The real revenge wasn't in making them suffer. It was in thriving despite them. And the real love, the kind I'd been searching for my whole life, wasn't in sacrificing myself for other people. It was in finally, completely, utterly loving myself. On my wedding day, as I walked down the aisle to James, I thought about all of this. I thought about the woman I'd been, the woman I'd become, the woman I was still becoming. My mother was in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of obligation or expectation, but real tears of joy for her daughter's happiness. My sister was my maid of honor, standing beside me because she genuinely wanted to be there. My brother was officiating the ceremony, speaking with pride about his sister's journey. And James was waiting for me at the altar, looking at me with a love that had nothing to do with what I could give him or what I could do for him. A love that was simply for me. As I said my vows, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never again confuse love with sacrifice. I would never again diminish myself to make other people comfortable. I would never again believe that my worth was tied to my usefulness. I would spend the rest of my life protecting the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. And I would help every person I could understand that they deserved to do the same. The rejection text that had started this entire journey sat in my files, not deleted, not burned in some cathartic ritual, just filed away as evidence of a moment when everything changed. I didn't need to destroy it or hide it. I didn't need revenge on the people who'd sent it. I just needed to keep moving forward into the life that was mine. And that's exactly what I planned to do.